It was another day to forget for Ferrari here in Hungary as Max Verstappen extended his lead at the top of the F1 Drivers' Championship to 80 points. But were there some missed clues that led to Ferrari's strategy slip-ups here at the Hungaroring, and could they have been avoided? Welcome to the latest edition of Paddock Packdown. Max Verstappen will head on his summer holidays in a very good mood after scoring his 8th win of the season here in Hungary. F1 is getting ready to go on the summer break as well. We've got some deck chairs out here in the paddock and a bit of a summer vibe going on. I'm joined by Autosport F1 Editor Matt Kew, but we're not talking about summer holidays. We are talking about Ferraris Strategy and their miscues today. A lot of missed opportunities. The team went from running second and third on the grid to leading the race at one point as well with Charles Leclerc, to only coming away with 4th and 6th place. A very bad day for the Scuderia. It looked at one point as though Ferrari was on for a 1-2 finish. Leclerc was leading the race after overtaking George Russell, and Carlos Sainz was bearing down on the Mercedes as well to try and grab P2. It was around the second round of pit stops that everything turned. Leclerc moved onto the hard compound tyre, and from there his race really fell apart, meaning that he'd not only lost positions to Verstappen, to many other drivers as well, and he came home in 6th place in the end. A big blow to his F1 Championship hopes. Now, Matt, you crunched the numbers on Friday and it was all looking very rosy for Ferrari indeed. How big a missed opportunity was this for the team today?
Massively, and that's before you do any sort of in-depth analysis. Verstappen starting 10th, Perez 11th, Ferrari starting 2nd and 3rd. They've lost that in a race where it wasn't wet and there was no safety car. Yes, we had 2 virtual safety cars, but they're about neutralising gaps. They're not about getting rid of gaps. And Verstappen had a spin in that. And it's all about inflicting maximum damage on Red Bull in a rare case where they did get it wrong in qualifying through reliability and subpar driving, which obviously we haven't come to expect from the Red Bull drivers. They really had to pounce, and they had the Mercedes in front, effectively the 3rd slowest car in Formula 1, and they couldn't get past it.
Yeah, it did really turn around for Red Bull coming away with that win, and for Ferrari, not a good day indeed. And it was, of course, that hard tyre switch that Leclerc made that really did ruin his race. He said afterwards that that's where it all fell apart and he was baffled by the decision. Ferrari did explain the decisions behind that. So their explanation was that their simulations show that the hard tyre would be good enough to get to the end of the race. They expected a difficult warm-up period. They expected it would be 10 to 11 laps that the hard tyre wouldn't be as good as the medium. That would give the others an advantage. But then after that, it would be quicker. Now, the decision to start on the mediums, that did mean that Ferrari couldn't go for another set of mediums at the end. They had to either go for the hards or the softs. But the starting tyre, that was actually something Max Verstappen picked up on in the press conference. He went to the grid on soft tyres and he realised that even with these, I'm struggling for grip. So what's it going to be like on hards? He actually planned to start the race on hards, which would have really twisted things around. Ferrari, though, they stuck entirely to their simulations. Matt, do you think that Ferrari is maybe trusting data a little bit too much and should have gone a bit more on feel today?
Absolutely, particularly if they're going, our data told this about the hard tyre, when they didn't do any real-world running on the hard tyre up until the race.
So there was no running on Friday on the hards?
No, in FP2, the equivalent session to the race, it was all on soft tyres. So if you're doing all of that to get a deep dive and understanding how they behave, the drop-offs, your average pace, why run that strategy if you're then going to throw it? And then you look again at the race. So you've got a 2-3. You either go past the Mercedes or you at least split strategy. So one of them should, in my view, have been starting on the softs. But the whole point is, if you're going to twist an analogy, which I like to, is Red Bull sort of played the hand they were dealt. They went out, and as we saw when we were on the grid, we saw Verstappen slide off at turn 2, and this was on the soft tyres, struggling for grip as obviously temperatures were low. But that's fine. He then has that real-world experience. Ferrari, by sticking sort of steadfast to their plan and not playing to conditions, they're like trying to play the house, and the house usually wins. So you've got to show that adaptability.
Yeah, there definitely does need to be that kind of flexibility. And let's get on to the missed clues that we mentioned at the top of this video, because there were some signs quite early on that the hard tyre wasn't going to be a very good one to race with. The first driver to make that switch to the hard was Kevin Magnussen on lap 6, and immediately his times tanked pretty quickly. Haas opted for the similar thing with Mick Schumacher. They put him onto hards, and again, he had the same struggles. Probably the most telling, though, was the 2 Alpines of Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon, because they were going for the one stop. They committed to that, and in fairness, they did make it work. They got to the end of the race and scored points with both cars. But even so, it was very clear early on in that stint just how much time they were losing. We saw Daniel Ricciardo nip past both of the Alpine drivers in the space of 2 corners. Again, he had the fresher tyres. He didn't have that struggle with the hard. His teammate Lando Norris, he did the final stint of the race on hards. And he actually said in the driver pen, he was like, you may as well have been on wets. That's how poor they were. That's how much of a struggle it was. Matteo Binotto was asked, did you look at what Alpine were doing? Did you think maybe we shouldn't be doing this? And he said, a strategy's never set in stone. We do look at things that happen with other teams, and that gives us an idea of should we go for that tyre or not. But realistically, do you think that they should have heeded a bit more warning instead of, again, sticking to the data? Ferrari always says we've got plan A, B, C, D, E and everything like that. But surely when you see a team struggling so much on the hards, that should maybe be, hang on a minute, we shouldn't do that.
Exactly. By having those sort of segregated plans, it's like they're just looking at the scenario and go, it fits this box and this box, and there needs to be an element of being allowed to blur lines. So if I can unprofessionally look at my notebook, see that I've written down sort of the hard time movers. So Magnussen, as you say, was put on them laps 6 to 35. So he does a whole stint for Leclerc, takes them on lap 39. So you can see the whole behaviour of that tyre. And if you just take a step backwards as well, okay, we have different compounds, but the hard tyre has been pretty unfavoured in sort of 90% of races so far this season. So it's not acting on instinct, but when the press room, so us, we're paid to write about it, not to be strategists sat on the pit wall. When we're going as soon as it happens, even with Magnussen, we're not going as soon as Leclerc gets on hard. When it's the Haas, 33 laps earlier, we're going, that looks like a bad call. That should be brazenly obvious to the Ferrari pit wall, surely, if it is to us.
Yeah, you would have thought so. And I think, even in the press room, and again, we are not strategists. We don't know the ins and outs. And the data may say, look, this is the favoured strategy. But it seemed like such a bizarre decision to be making. And it has now had a huge impact on Charles Leclerc's championship race. Charles Leclerc said after his mistake in France, if I make errors like that, I don't deserve to win the championship. But surely the same applies to Ferrari. If it makes mistakes like this, does it deserve to win the championship?
No, and of course, like with Leclerc crashing out of the lead in France, you also have to look at the context, which is, yes, we know the Ferrari is unreliable and it has, cost them wins. So when the opportunities arise, you've got to double down on it, especially when you've got two cars ahead of your fiercest rivals. And again, just to look at some of the numbers from the race, you're having track position, and then at one point, Max Verstappen is leading by 31 seconds. He's a full pit stop clear, and he's already spun the car at that point. And Ferrari aren't there to pounce. Like, yes, we are being downbeat on Ferrari, but partly that's because it's sort of getting to a point where it's indefensible. And two, we've been denied a championship battle. If, I don't want to be pessimistic about next year, but you would have thought the F1 75 is going to have the supremacy over Red Bull, most of all in 2022, before there's this convergence. And also the flaws with the Red Bull are more obvious, whether it's, being overweight. So they're going to rectify those. So this is Ferrari's best chance, and they're so far from seizing it, they're letting it go away, and it's frustrating to watch.
Yes, and it is that ultimately that F1 title fight we do want to be seeing, and we're not really getting right now. But Matteo Binotto, when he was talking post-race, he was quite clear saying we didn't have the car to win today. Like, no matter what we did, even if we'd nailed our strategy, Ferrari would not have won the Hungarian Grand Prix, and it's the first time he felt this season that was true. Now, you can see that with Carlos Sainz a little bit, that he ended up finishing fourth, despite having the same strategy as Lewis Hamilton, so that does point to the struggles the F1 75 had in these cooler conditions. But even so, surely you need to be maximising your points. We saw in Austria, Red Bull didn't have the pace to win, but they still came home second with Verstappen, they still maximised their points. So really, even if Ferrari is saying, look, we couldn't have won this today, the fact they didn't come home at least second and third or something like that, surely that points to, again, another missed opportunity that slipped through their fingers.
Completely, and that's if you buy Binotto's claim, which again at this point I dispute. One, because Sainz is saying a 1-2 was eminently possible, and yes, that probably goes right back to the grid and choosing the medium tyres over softs. Then they're talking about the pace going away. But if you look at the fastest lap sequence, so that's basically where you take their 10 fastest laps and you get an average time from that. Leclerc's third behind Hamilton first and Verstappen second. And the difference between Verstappen and Leclerc is only 0.2 of a second. So over a 10-gap period, again, when, okay, Verstappen starts well and is getting a few cars, but when he's on a different strategy behind, you have track position. 0.2 a lap is survivable, certainly for a greater lap before throwing it away on the hard tyres. So I would take umbrage with the claim in the first place, let alone before getting to the fact that this championship can be about damage limitation, which Red Bull have done so effectively. It's what half of the Mercedes press releases this year have talked about, is damage limitation, and Ferrari, again, they haven't done that. No,
it's been again another very difficult day for Ferrari. A lot to do over the summer break. Matteo Binotto said that he doesn't see any need for changes. He sees no need to panic. He said he won't put it down to bad luck, but also he doesn't think there is a need for any changes at Maranello. But I think, an important summer of soul searching coming up. But it is now F1 summer break. The paddock is finally packing down for the final time before we head off on our holidays. Matt, thank you very much for joining me. And thank you guys for joining us through the first half of this season. We're going to be off on a little break now, but we'll be back with the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa at the end of August.